Hey guys, this is Matt Invictus. Earlier today, DC made some announcements, mostly related to a new Justice League and Titans books. I think there was some other stuff, but those were the main ones. I'm not happy with these announcements. I don't like a lot of the creative teams attached to these books. I don't like the lineups. But the thing that really started to bother me was how little criticism DC faces compared to Marvel. It's like, if you're on the internet, you can't go 5 minutes without seeing someone criticize Marvel, saying like, "Oh, their writers suck. They're making all these horrible creative decisions. They treat their fans like crap." And the thing is, I agree with most of these criticism. I agree that Marvel is a dumpster fire right now, and they deserve to be criticized this way. I do agree that they have bad writers, not the best conduct on social media. So yes, Marvel is filled with problems, but the thing that gets overlooked a lot of the time is that DC is just as bad. Now the thing is, a lot of people will say, but DC is the lesser of the evils. They're bad, but they're not that bad. And it's like, that might have been true at one point, but the thing is, they've come pretty close to closing the gap, because it's like Marvel. Okay, first of all, they've brought back most of their iconic characters, pretty much all of them. In fact, it's like Tony Stark is Iron Man again, Steve Rogers is Captain America again, and he's not a Hydra agent anymore. So it's like, okay, they've gotten rid of most like the replacement heroes. And then in terms of social media conduct, it's like Marvel creators have a reputation for not working well with fans, like for being like very antagonistic and bullying their readers. But the thing is, over the past 2 months, they've like most of the most antagonistic creators have are pretty much gone from social media. It's like Dan Slott, Nick Spencer, and Mark Waid. They've all quit social media at the moment, and also Heather Antos quit Marvel altogether. She doesn't even work in comics anymore. So it's like the four creators who are like most likely to be antagonistic to fans, they're gone for the moment. So it's like, and you could still make the case that like Marvel has worse writers, DC has a slightly better talent pool, and they might, but I still feel like the quality gap has been closed enough that neither company is really the lesser of the evils. Yet, despite that, DC only seems to get a fraction of the criticism that Marvel does, and that really bothers me, because there's like all these comic fans online, they're all constantly talking about how much they hate guys like Tom Brevoort and Dan Slott, and how they're like, suck at their job, they're ruining comics. And it's like, I don't like those guys, but the thing is, like, Dan Didio, who's just as bad as those guys, if not worse. Dan Didio is the publisher of DC. If you don't know, he's just as bad, if not worse. In fact, I would say he's worse, because at least Slott and Brevoort and all these guys at Marvel people hate, most of them had a good period. There was a period in their careers where they weren't so bad, because like Brevoort, he's been working at as an editor for Marvel for God knows how long, maybe even before I was born. But he didn't really start to suck until, I don't know, like 2013, 2014. So, but the thing is with Didio over at DC, he's had a position of power at the company since for 14 years now, and he's never been good. He was promoted to like I think vice president, or executive editor in 2004. He started making all these crap decisions. He wanted to kill off Dick Grayson in Infinite Crisis. Dick Grayson, like one of the most beloved characters in all of comics. Didio wanted to kill him. Jeff Johns had to step in to save poor Dick. And then Didio, he became co-publisher in 2010. A year later, he basically masterminded the New 52 reboot, which is the worst thing to ever happen to comics. It's DC might never recover from that fucking reboot. And despite that, too many people give Didio a free pass, and I think a big reason for it is because Didio just isn't really on social media. He's on social media, like, saying all this dumb shit about, like, fans and all these, like, wacky statements. He's not, like, calling his people who criticize him, like, bigots or harassers or anything. And I think despite the fact that he's just as bad as his job, if not worse than these people at Marvel, people don't mind as much. just because he's not as, like, openly antagonistic and political as some of these other guys. I think a significant amount of, like, this backlash towards Marvel is it is politically motivated, because there's this in case you don't know, there's this group of people who, like, claim to be very progressive and pro-inclusivity, claim to be all these good things, and they turn out to be, like, a bunch of, like, bullies who lash out at anyone who disagrees with them. They're usually described as, like, a social justice warriors, or SJWs. Basically, they're people who claim to be something good, but then turn out to be bullies in the end. And I'm very familiar with this group of people. I've been familiar with them in gaming for years, ever since this certain gaming controversy that shall not be named started in 2014. So I know all about, like, the social justice crowd and the awful things they say. They treat my friends like crap. I see them saying, like, awful shit to my friends and people I like all the time. So I get it. I get being frustrated with these people. But the thing is, they're not the problem with comics. They're a symptom of the problem. Comics have... DC has been shits long before the social justice crowd came in. And the reason we've got, like, this... all these, like, social justice bullies in the industry saying crappy things about other fans, making all these, like, wild accusations and stuff, is because these companies are managed by people who do not care about the consumers. They don't care about the fans. They don't care about the customers. They're just horribly mismanaged. And it's like the New 52 reboot that happened at DC. It had nothing to do with politics. It was a completely apolitical decision, and it was just absolutely horrible. I mean, there have been shit comics ever since comics started coming. There have been shit comics forever. Like problems with the industry have persisted. It's like the 90s had so much bad stuff came out of the 90s. Like the crazy Spider-Man clone saga that I've been tormenting myself with for the past couple weeks. Completely apolitical. But yet there are all these, like, people who only really seem to take issue with comics when there's some kind of political motivation, and that's completely counterproductive. I think that these people who are far more inclined to criticize a comics company or a creator or creative decision when it involves some political message that they don't like, I think that they are part of the problem too, because there's just so much wrong with comics. Has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with social justice warriors or anything, and yet it seems to get a free pass from these people who claim to care about comics, who claim to care about fixing the industry, making these stories, making good stories, but they just don't spend enough time tackling the core issues. It's these people in charge, these, like, horrible publishers and editors who suck at their job, don't understand the companies or the characters or their fans, and they're just running everything into the ground. And then getting to, like, the DC's recent announcements into particular that kind of spurred my rant. The Justice League stuff isn't that bad. There's some bad. I'm bothered that, like, a Cyborg is on not one but two Justice League teams now, and that they refuse to, like, take Barry Allen off the Justice League. They, like, took Hal Jordan off for years. They've used, like, 3 Green Lanterns in his place, but God forbid they have a Justice League without Barry Allen, because he's just the most badass and complex character in all of comics, And then I don't like how Wonder Woman's on the Justice League Dark team. You got all these cool magic based DC characters like Etrigan and Constantine, who didn't make the cut, but Wonder Woman, who's already in a whole bunch of books, did. So I have issues with these Justice League books, okay? But they're not... But it's not that bad overall. These are more personal gripes. And then you've got the Titans books. Now, the Titans, the Teen Titans, they could have been one of the biggest franchises. They could have been huge. It's like, in case you don't know, in the 80s, Marv Wolfman's New Teen Titans was like I think the second or third best-selling comic in the world. It was only behind X-Men and I think Fantastic Four too. The point is, it was a massive hit. And they started to falter in the 90s, but that's not a big deal. Good franchises falter all the time. They could have pulled him out of it, but the problem is, ever since Jeff Johns quit Teen Titans in I think it was 2005, 2006. I think it was 2006. They have never put a good writer on either Teen Titans or Titans ever again. They never put a great writer on either of those books. It's either a has-been like Scott Lobdell or Dan Abnett, or some wannabe like a Benjamin Percy with very little experience. And it's because they keep putting all their top talent on like Justice League and Batman. This is the core problem with DC, okay? They love a small group of characters. It's like the main Justice League members, the Trinity, Flash, Aquaman. They love those guys, and maybe a couple more, Damian Wayne, Robin. But aside from that, they just don't give a fuck about the majority of DC heroes. It's like, you know, they never invest good talent in the Titans. It's like the new Titans book. They like the Rebirth run. It had a pretty good lineup. I liked the lineup a lot. It was the original 5 and a couple of superfluous members, but the core cast was good. The problem was the writer. They got Dan Abnett, who's a has-been, very washed up, did a shit job. By the end of that run, I don't know anyone who thought Abnett was doing a good job. There was nothing fucking wrong with the lineup. But what DC did is they kept the shit writer and threw the characters out of the book. They got this like a completely new roster. It's like, I think the only one they kept was Dick Grayson, and then it's like the new roster. It's like they brought back Beast Boy and Raven and Steel. I don't know. Like last time I checked, Steel was still an adult, way too old for the team. So maybe it's going to be his niece or anything. The point is, they fucked up a perfectly good roster that most fans liked, but they kept the writer who ran the book into the ground. And then you got Teen Titans. The guy writing it, it's like it's the guy who did New 52 Suicide Squad, and that's like the only major book I've ever seen him work on. And I won't even get into nitpicking the roster. It's just they refuse. They got all this potential. It's like the Teen Titans. They've had popular cartoon shows. They got their own live-action TV series coming out like later this year or next year maybe. Point is, they've got so much outside media exposure, but these motherfuckers running DC refuse to invest in their comics simply because they don't care. They just don't give a damn. It's like DC, they've got all these, like, you know, all these promising franchises, all these promising characters that could be doing good work with, but they refuse to invest in them because they don't give a damn. They're like, you know, and that's another problem I have with this their New Age of Heroes lineup. You've got all these new characters that no one really asked for, that they're super invested in, and meanwhile you got this, like, you know, giant list of commercially successful teams and characters. I'm not even talking personal favorites. I mean, I made the decision that I'd make this whole video without ranting out personal favorites. Like, I'm not going to be bitching about Wally West or Tim Drake or any of those guys. But it's like they got this long-ass list of commercially successful characters who have, like, held down a solo series for at least 50 issues. So we know there's some marketability there. There's some potential there. They refuse to tap into it, and then they keep chasing these goddamn vanity projects. This DC that's so horribly mismanaged. And then when it comes to, like, the characters that actually are invested in, you've got a current Batman run, which has been a nightmare. It, like, started out just kind of meh. It was kind of hard to... You couldn't really tell if it was, like, brilliant or just stupid. And then later down the line, it became clear, oh yeah, this is just stupid. So I got an abysmal Batman run. Then you got they're putting Brian Michael Bendis on Superman, which, to be fair, has garnered quite a bit of criticism. I've seen quite a bit of nervous responses to Bendis on Superman, so credit where it's due. People care about that. But again, I have the feeling it's maybe a bit more politically motivated than those other complaints, because Bendis is there on Twitter making saying, like, you know, crazy stuff about fans and stuff. So and then it's just they got very few worthwhile books at the moment. And then aside from their main line of comics, DC consistently fails at everything. They've like announced all these new imprints. First of all, they got the DC's like Black series. It's just called DC Black. I think it's supposed to be their mature imprint, and it's just extremely disappointing series of books. It's got like Frank Miller on Superman. Let that sink in case you didn't know. Frank Miller, who's at this point in his life at least partially insane. I can barely write Batman. They put him on fucking Superman. Does not sound like a good idea. You got Scott Snyder on Batman again, who at this point has promised 2 or 3 times that he is going to stop writing Batman. He's going to take a break for Batman, but then DC slips him another big juicy paycheck, and he changes his mind. He comes back for more Batman, except it's more soulless than ever. And then you got Kelly Sue DeConnick, the most overrated writer in the entire comics industry, on Wonder Woman, and then a couple more announcements. More Greg Rucka on Wonder Woman, more Brian Azzarello on Batman. Basically, very disappointing lineup, and the synopses for these books do not sound that good. I feel like another big waste of potential. And then you've got their young adult imprints, which sound like an even bigger waste of potential, because again, a fairly good idea. It's like okay, comics for like teenagers and stuff, graphic novels, so it's like they're not really hindered by like continuity or accessibility issues. You don't need to have like a local comic shop 5 minutes from your house in order to access these books. So they had a good idea that could potentially have really good long-term effects on the industry, but the problem is they got the worst possible people and the worst possible ideas for it. They brought in a bunch of like young adult writers who have like with a little to no background in comics and have possibly never read a comic in their entire lives up until now to do them, and the synopses for these books sound horrible. Like there's one that really stood out to me with this lady's like, I wanted to include a panel where Catwoman points at some guy's crotch and then it deflates, but the artist didn't know how we were going to do the sound effects, so we scrapped that idea. And that's the moment where I realized they're hiring a bunch of people who have no idea what the fuck they're doing to make these young adult books, and it's like, and I guess like some guy who's, I guess, in charge of marketing for DC flat out said, oh yeah, these young adult books, they're not necessarily superhero stories, and that's the point where I'm just like, go fuck you. Don't try and you're running a company known for superhero stories, printing comics with superheroes, and yet you don't want to tell superhero stories with them. It's like you got this huge, giant millions of Americans who like love superhero movies and shows. Like you got these superhero films making billions of dollars at the box office. Love superheroes would great potential customers, could potentially become really hardcore long-time fans if you can just kind of like ease them into comics, and you're not interested in targeting them. You're interested in targeting a bunch of people who don't even give a fuck about superhero stories. And it's like, it's not about making money anymore. Comics, they're not about the money. It's about vanity projects. It's like it's because they wanted to make these books as YA as possible because that's cool. They want to be hip and trendy. It's like that how do you do fellow kids thing. So they took another perfectly good idea and ran it into the ground with horrible mismanagement. And it's like, I see this crap all the time from DC. They put out so many shit books, hired so many unqualified writers, and done so much horrible crap. It's like, good characters and their fans, and yet they only get a small fraction of the criticism that Marvel does, just because they're not as openly political as Marvel, just because they don't really spend as much time putting I think I've made my point to this point. I think I made my point by now. I'm just so frustrated and fed up that I've lost all energy. So the point is, I'm disappointed that these fans who are aware of the problems with Marvel, understand what's going on in that company, why they suck, why they're failing, seem to keep giving DC a free pass. I'm starting to feel kind of isolated, like I'm one of the only people left who really cares about comics anymore, because all those people around me seem to be either just kind of blindly accepting. I don't want to be too antagonistic. Point is, I'm disappointed. I've been ranting for about 20 minutes now, and I just gotta take a break before my head explodes. So thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Good night, everybody.